Hey, what's up everyone? It's been a while, but I'm back with a new tutorial, and today we're going to be making this really cool neon line loop. It's a bit Tronish, but I'm excited to get into it. I've also got some new projects coming your way, teaching you all about abstract design and After Effects, and I'm really looking forward to sharing those with you. But less talking, more designing. Let's open up AE and get into it. Okay, so we are over in After Effects, and man, I just have to say, it is so good to be back with you all. As usual, we are going to start with a new composition, and we are in our default layout so that it's easy to follow along. So let's go ahead and start with a new comp. I'm going to go with 1080 by 1920, 30 frames per second, and let's change the duration to 10 seconds. It'll be a 10-second loop. I'm also going to come up to the composition name here and just name it base, because this is going to be our base composition. And background color is fine. Let's hit OK. So I've been doing a lot of vertical design, making videos for apps and mobile web content. So this is why this one has come along. And I've been really enjoying how to figure out how to design in this dimension. So we're going to stick with our portrait composition here. And the first thing I'm going to do inside of this base composition is go to New, Shape Layer. And this is just going to be the foundation of this whole thing. So let's twirl down and go over to Add here. And let's select the rectangle. Let's twirl down the rectangle path, and I'm going to change this. Let's unlink it so we have access to both our X and Y. And I'm going to change this to, let's go 2. And then let's go on the Y, 1920, so we take up the whole composition here. You're not going to see anything yet outside of this boundary box, but that's okay. We'll fill this in a second. Everything else we can leave at 0. I'm going to come back to Add again, and let's go to Fill. And let's fill this thing in. So twirl this down. Right now it's red. Let's just change that to a nice white. And if I zoom in here, let me select off. You can start seeing that line right here. You got to get in really close. But let's come back to our shape layer. Now that we have that made, and we're going to go to Add one more time. And let's select the repeater. Twirl that down. In the copies, I'm going to do, let's do 30. Copies, and right now you only see 3, but it's going off the screen here along the x-axis, and the offset we can leave at 0. But let's twirl down the transform repeater properties. We don't want to twirl this down yet on our main layer, but this is the transform for the repeater. You can see this is where our lines are starting to come in. So if we pull this position down, you know, they're going to come in and collapse on themselves. So if I set that to 0, now they're all stacked on top of each other here, which is fine. That's kind of what we want. And before I play with this position property here, I want to come up and I'm going to go to toggle switches and modes. And let's make this a 3D layer because I think we're going to play around with the geometry here just to make it a little more visually interesting. And I'll show you what we'll do with that here in a second. But now we have that at 3D. I want to make sure that we had that set. So go ahead and do that. And then down in position here, again, in the repeater properties, let's set this to 45. This is kind of the spacing I want. You can bring this up or down as much as you want. And, you know, if you bring it down all the way like this, just bump up your copies and you can fill that in right there. But I'm going to keep this at 45 because I like that spacing there. And right now, this thing is obviously right in the middle. And I want to take up the whole composition here. So let me zoom back in. I'm going to twirl up. All this can stay the same in the repeater properties. So I'm going to twirl that up. But I am going to twirl down the layer transform properties. And this is just kind of our overall positioning and everything. So we'll go 0 and then 960 on the Y, and then just leave the Z at 0 as well. All of this we can leave the same. And let's twirl that back up. And so this is why we made it 3D right here. So in the geometry options, and I'm on the advanced renderer, by the way. Advanced 3D, sorry, and then you may be on classic or cinema 4D, but let's go to advanced because we're going to utilize some of the features there. So on the bevel style, I'm going to go concave. You'll start seeing this really take shape here. And so I'm going to change that bevel depth to 3. The hole depth, let's change that, let's keep that at 100. And the extrusion depth, I'm going to change that to 10. And really, you're not seeing much, but you can see when I did change that to 10, Let me do that again. You see how that kind of expanded this rectangle a bit? But if I really zoom in, we're getting this from the bevel, this gray line running throughout. And that is just some detail that's really going to help us out all the way at the end in our render composition. So let's come back over to our shape layer. Let's twirl that up. And now that we have this at 3D, we can go ahead and create a camera. And on the camera, let's just leave that camera 1. I'm going to change this to a 2-node camera. And then on the preset, we'll adjust the Z positioning on that. So let's go to OK. You can see it kind of changed a little. We're at a very wide angle right now. And so we're catching a lot of the extrusion at the edges and then not so much right here in the middle. So let's twirl down our camera and twirl down the transform. And we will play around with the position here. So point of interest, we can leave that where it's at. The position, I'm going to keep that at 540, 960 on the X and Y. And on the Z, let's bump this out. Because what I want to do, no matter what your camera set on, is get rid of the wide angle effect here. So let's try -1000. And then twirl down your camera options and let's just match that. So that would be, I guess, 1000 on the zoom. And so this kind of flattens out a bit, but we still have that nice bevel in there, but it's not as wide angle. We're catching all the extrusion on the edges. Let's just do, for good measure, -1500, and then let's change the zoom to 1500. And so you just want to make sure those values match. And so we're getting a nice flat look here, but keeping the, like I said, keeping the bevel details right there. So I like how that is coming together. So let's twirl up our camera here. And next thing we're going to do is add a light. And so let's go to new light. And on our light type, let's go with spot. I love the spotlights in After Effects. So let's go with spotlight and we'll adjust. Let's leave all this and we'll adjust that here as we twirl it down. So we're going to add that spotlight right in the middle. And you can see we are getting a really harsh spotlight right here. So let's expand that a bit. We'll move it around a little as well. So let's twirl down our spotlight, twirl down transform. And on our point of interest, we're going to change that to 600. Move it over a bit. 900, we're going to move it up a bit, and -500, we're going to bring it out a bit. So we kind of lost it there, which is fine. And we're going to adjust that here in the position. So let's change this to 650 and then 850 on the Y. And on the Z on our position, we're going to bring that way out to -850. You can see we're getting this nice fall off, wider field of view on the light, on the spotlight. Orientation, all of this, rotation, make sure that's all zeroed out. That's fine. And then on the light options, let's twirl that down. Intensity, let's drop this to 75%, just so we're not blasting out the whites there and just really overexposing this thing. Color, white is fine. Cone angle, I'm going to bump this up to maybe 100 just to widen that up a bit. Let's go 105. As you can see, I like working in these increments. 5s and 10s and things like that, and then I'll just fine tune if I need to, but it always gives me a good idea there. Cone feather, let's change that to, it's at 50 right now. I really want this nice and smooth on the gradient, really on the fall off here. It is a nice gradual and not so harsh, because, you know, if you bring this down, you're going to get these really harsh edges on the top there. And so let's keep that at 100%. Just so everything is nice and smooth. And then on our shadows, let's just turn those on for good measure. Shadow darkness, 100%, and diffusion 0. That's totally fine. So this is looking good. We can maybe adjust it just a bit, just how you see fit, but I just like where that's at right now. And this looks good. Let's twirl up our spotlight, and we are done with our base composition. So this is looking good, and let's get ready to add some effects into it. So I'm going to come up to my project panel here and click the new composition icon, and we're going to keep the whole way through the same settings on our compositions, which will be helpful. So in our composition name, this is the only thing we're changing. I'm actually going to name this gobo. And if you don't know what a gobo is, it's basically, think of it like a stencil or a screen that you would place in front of a light source, and it would give you different shapes and patterns, things like that. And so we're going to create a gobo for our neon lights here. Same composition settings. Let's click OK. And this is going to be easy to make. Let's just go down here, go new, solid. And I'm just gonna make a black solid here. Click make comp size for good measure, and let's click OK. And I'm gonna come over to my effects and presets, which you should see here if you're on the default view. Otherwise, it's wherever you have it. I'm gonna type in fractal noise, and you'll see this noise and grain fractal noise right here. Let's double click on that, making sure our black solid is selected when we do, and it should apply. Otherwise, you can just drag and drop it over onto the solid. But we have this basic fractal noise here, and all we're going to do is change a couple settings here. So on the fractal type, let's change this to turbulent sharp, and we're going to make this kind of stringy, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So noise type, I'm going to change this to spline, and let's invert this on the contrast. Let's bump this way up to something like 6,000. And this doesn't look like anything yet. All we need to do is clip this on the overflow, and nothing in the transform, but what's really going to make this come out now, this complexity is way too high. So it's trying to fit in too many details into this right now. And so we need to bump this all the way down to the lowest level, which is 1. And so when you do that, you start seeing now we have this perfectly black and white, stringy kind of liquidy gobo that we're going to work with. And you'll see how I use this here in a second. We're not actually going to put this in front of a spotlight, but we're going to use a blending mode to kind of use it as a faux gobo, and it'll make everything look really cool. And then what's nice is that later, if you want to change this, you can animate it, different things like that. But I will leave that up to you for later. So that's all we need to do on the gobo. So let's come back over to our project panel. Let's make our next composition. And so our next one is going to be our FX comp. And that's all I'm going to do. Everything's the same as what we've been doing. So let's click OK. And let's grab our base composition and our gobo composition. So for right now, I'm going to hide this gobo comp, and we're just going to focus on our lines here. And what we need to do is create 6 adjustment layers. And if you know me and my past tutorials, you know I like to kind of layer all my effects if possible, because when you get into bigger projects, and things get harder to find, it's nice just to be able to look, kind of scroll through your layers and pinpoint exactly where it is. So just getting you in the practice of that right now. So let's go ahead, new adjustment layer, new adjustment layer, new adjustment layer. And let's do that 6 times. Now it's good. And we're going to name these as we go through. So let's come down to our first adjustment layer here. And I'm going to name this offset. And this is just going to be, honestly, our only keyframes in this whole project. This is what's going to make the movement of this whole neon line loop. We're going to come over to effects and presets, type in offset. We can drag and drop that on there. And making sure our playhead is at the first frame. And this is 10 seconds long, remember. We are going to keyframe the shift center to. So go ahead and click that stopwatch to activate our first keyframe. If I hit U on the keyboard, that's going to expose that for us. And just for good measure, I'm going to change this to 1920 because I know that's going to take this right in the middle of comp. My composition is 1920 by 1080 or 1080 by 1920. And I know that 1920 is going to be right in the middle of my comp. So we have 1920, and then I'm going to take my playhead all the way to the end. And I'm just going to do a quick little bit of math. So I have 1920 here, and I'm just going to do an asterisk. So which is multiply times 2. And that'll just take me 1920 times 2 is 3840. So I'm going to play this. And that is really slow. 1 and 2, it's moving down on the y-axis. And I actually want it to move up. So let me take my playhead all the way to the end there. So I'm making sure I'm on this last keyframe. And I'm honestly just going to change this to negative 3840. And that'll keep everything right in the middle here. Right where we want it, except now it's going to go up, and it's a little faster because instead of just going 1920 2 times, it's going backward 1920. What would that be? 0, 3 times. I think 3 or 4. I don't know, you can do the quick math on that, but we have some nice movement here now, and it's perfectly looping if you watch this playthrough. So honestly, this offset effect is pretty easy to use. You just pretty much have to match up your first keyframe and your last keyframe to get that perfect loop. So let's move on to our next one. That's all we need to do. That's the only movement we need. So I'm going to twirl that up, and let's go to our next adjustment layer. And this is going to be our color. And name that color. And what we're going to use to color this thing is good old Colorama. Can't ever go wrong with this one. And I'm going to twirl down this input phase and get phase from, we'll leave that intensity. Add phase, I'm going to change this to, let's go with the base comp here. So we're pulling all of our information from this base comp. Mode, let's change this to clamp. And on our phase shift, I'm just going to change this to 90 degrees. You can really do whatever you want in this. You could even animate this one. But for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to keep this right here. I'm going to twirl up input phase, and then let's twirl down output cycle. And you can see we have, this is default. We have a good gradient of 6 colors. I honestly only want to use 4 colors here. And so the preset palette, we're going to leave at none. I'm going to select this yellow, and I'm going to click and just kind of drag it off. I'm going to take this kind of purple color, do the same thing, click, hold, and drag it off. And it doesn't actually drag off with you, but it'll just disappear as you do that. On this blue, I'm just going to bring this one up right about there. You know, try to get it as close to, well, I guess that'd be like 270 degrees right there. And then the green, I'm going to do the same here. Just get it right over here, so it looks pretty much perfectly matched up on this wheel. So on a red here, and we'll call this 0 degrees. I'm going to change this to, let's double click on that little tag there, and I'll change that to black. On our 180 degree, I'm going to change this from that cyan to more of a royal blue here. And then on our 270 degree here, let's double click and change that to red. And so now we have this nice color wheel here. And let's twirl up output cycle, and that's pretty much all we need to do on our colorama. So we are done with our color. Let's go to our next adjustment layer, and this is going to be our blur layer. And we're going to blur all of this color together, because right now it's obviously pretty harsh, which I don't like. And we're going to get rid of the seam and just make sure these colors really blend together more gradually and smoothly. And this is really easy. We're just going to take that blur adjustment layer, come over to our effects and presets, and type in directional blur. You can see that pop up, directional blur. Let's go ahead and drag that into our blur adjustment layer. Let's first take this off 90 degrees and set that to 0. So our direction is going on the y-axis, because if we keep it at the default 90, it's going on our x right here. So let's change that to 0. And our blur length, let's crank that all the way up to something like 250. So if I zoom in here, you can see that seam disappeared because we're blurring all of this together, which is nice. So if I turn that off, that harsh seam kind of comes back. So I'm just blending all of these colors together. It looks a lot more smooth. And what's nice is it makes that loop pretty much seamless now. So that looks pretty cool already, but obviously we're going to push this thing a little further. And that's all we need to do on our blur. Let's go to our next adjustment layer. And this is where we're going to shape this thing. And it's really easy just using the warp effect. So obviously come over to effects and presets, warp, drag that on. And we're just going to change 2 things in here. So on the warp style, and again, you know, this is all up to you. So if you kind of go through this list, you can really get some different looks. And honestly, that is up to you. This one's pretty cool too. Even if you try to get these to move up and down, you could use probably an offset X and Y. I don't know. I should play around with that one too, but I'll leave that up to you. Right now, the one we are going to use is the squeeze, and that's going to give us this shape right here. So squeezing this in, and I want to squeeze this in even more. We'll keep this at horizontal, but let's do 75. Yeah, 100 feels too tight there. Yeah, let's keep that at 75. I like how that's looking. And so now you can see this is squeezed in. We're getting some nice movement in there and dropping a frame right there. So we will take care of that later. And that's all we need to do on our warp. So let's go to our next adjustment layer. And this is, we're going to brighten everything up. So let's use the glow, and we're going to come over to our effects and presets, type in glow. And we're actually going to use 2 glows on this, but I'll just duplicate this one that we used first. Really easy settings on this one. Everything will stay the same except these 3. So let's go color channels is fine. Threshold, I'm going to drop this to 25%, really brighten this up. Let a lot of that glow through. On the radius, let's crank this to 80, really push everything out. And then our intensity, let's go 1.5. So it's not crazy right now. If I turn it on and off, you can see it's starting to glow, especially right here in the middle. Everything's starting to kind of bleed together here. But on the composite original, actually, let's set that to on top. So we don't want to blow that out too much. And we'll keep the glow operation to add. So everything else looks good, but I want to duplicate this. So I'm going to hit Command or Control D on my keyboard and duplicate that. You could also just drag and drop a new one in here, but we'll keep this at color channels, 98% on the threshold. We'll crunch that down a bit. The radius, I'm going to crank this even more to 120 because I want a bigger spread on the glow. And then the intensity, let's go to 2.5. And on the glow operation, I'm going to change this from add, and I'm going to drop this into color. And so we can kind of get these colors popping through here. I don't want to blow this out with the add blend mode. You can see where all the brights just start really bleeding together. So let's change this to color. Everything else can stay the same. It looks pretty weird right now, but this is where that gobo is going to come into play in a second. So let's just use our last adjustment layer here. We're going to name this curves. And we're really just going to bring these colors out. Let's go to effects and presets, get the curves, color correction, drag and drop that on there. And really all I'm doing here is I'm just going to pull this midpoint and really brighten everything up. Let's pull it right, I don't know, right about here, right in the middle of this box right here. Yeah, that looks good. If I turn that on and off, you can see we're really just brightening things up. Looks really nice. And that's all we need to do right there. So let's turn on our gobo, and it makes this whole thing look awful. So let's make the adjustments we need here. If you don't see your blend modes right here, just come to toggle switches and modes and click that. And let's change this to stencil luma. And we're really going to just use the brights from all this in our design to mask through our composition. So if I turn that off, you can see we're looking pretty bad there. Everything's just muddied and chunky and blended together. If I turn that back on, now we're just getting these brights popping through, and the darks are kind of fading in to where it is. And so, you know, you can go back here and see this is where we're getting all our brights popping through. So play through this. You can see now that gobo is cutting out, giving us some nice variation. Looks really good. I don't like how squished it is right here, if that makes sense. It looks too flat. So I'm actually just going to twirl down my gobo layer, transform, and on the scale, let's unlink this, our X and Y, and on our Y, I'm just going to scale this way up because I want some more variation. What was that, 315? Actually, let's go to 500%. Yes, that looks really good. All right, so you can see we have our colors and our offset moving behind that gobo, and you can see where that gobo is cutting through with the blacks in there, which is nice. So if I keep playing through that, we got a perfect loop. And that looks great. I love how that's come together. We got the brights and the glows popping through with the masking happening with the gobo that we created. And like I said, you can come back in here, change the shape of it, animate it, do whatever you want. So we only have one more composition, and that's just kind of the render comp, really to add the finishing touches on this. And I'm going to zoom in here and just play again so we can see this thing. And I think it looks really good right there. Honestly, we could leave it. It's very clean, very modern. Of course, I want to maybe give it a little posterization and some noise. So I'm going to go back to my project panel, click new composition. Let's name this render comp. Same everything on this that we've been using. And in our render comp, let's drag in our FX comp that we just used. So everything's looping, everything's good. I'm going to create 2 adjustment layers. And let's name this first one noise, and the second one posterize time. And so let's go to our noise adjustment layer, and I'm just going to use the base noise and the noise and grain. I really like to use noise HLS auto, but for this one, just to keep it simple, let's go noise on this. And I'm going to bring this to about 25%. Maybe we can go up a little more actually. If I zoom in here, you can see where this noise is really starting to take effect and all the glows and everything, which I like. So I think I'm going to bump this up just a little bit more, maybe 35%. Yeah, that looks good. I like that. It's a little chunky, really giving a lot of detail within those glows, which is nice. And let's go ahead and turn off use color noise. I just want to make sure that's monochromatic there, so we're not messing up any of the colors. And then clip results can be on. And over in posterize time, I'm going to click on that adjustment layer and just give it that Posterize time effect. And let's drop this just half. So it's at 24 on default. Let's just go to 12. Garnet stuttering. Honestly, I kind of like the smooth. So we're getting the light moving up, moving through it. And this honestly is a pretty light effect. It shouldn't be using much of your processing power on your computer. So, but if it is, you can always drop this down to half. But I haven't seen this really be too much of a hog on anything. So thank you so much everyone for watching. I'm excited to be back. I'm excited for everything coming down the pike for tutorials, for abstract design, and just showing you different ways to get some really cool looks in After Effects and really pushing AE to its max. So as always, if you want this project file, head over to my site, radloops.com. You can get it there, as well as all my old loops and tutorials. You can also download some cool assets on there, and I have some new ones coming your way that will help you in your projects and everything, so stay tuned for that. But until then, you guys stay creative, and I'll see you on the next one.